Hello students, today we will be discussing about nuclear physics. So this particular topic is very important in any exam point of view. So you can expect one question for sure, whether it is advanced or mains or MSET. So you can definitely expect one question from this particular topic. So let us start with this. So nuclear physics, we will be learning about the nucleus, the size of the nucleus, what is present inside the nucleus, how a nucleus is formed, and different types of nuclear reactions, as well as the stability of nucleus and all those parameters which involve nucleus. Okay. So first of all, nucleus was basically discovered when Rutherford has performed his alpha ray scattering experiment, which we discussed in last class. So in that experiment, nucleus, the existence of nucleus was known and all the positive charge was concentrated at the center. So based on that, we can understand that nucleus basically contains protons and neutrons. So these are the two constituents of nucleus, and these two put together are called as nucleons. Nucleons meaning the particles of nucleus. Now, so whenever we deal with these nucleons or masses of these particles, which are very small, they have small masses, we have a completely different unit for understanding their masses. We use this unit called AMU, the value of which is generally 1.66 into 10 power minus 27 roughly approximately kg. So how we define 1 AMU is like this. 1 AMU is defined as 1/12 the mass of C12 nucleus. So when we consider carbon nucleus C12, so 1/12 the mass of that is basically what we define as 1 AMU, and the reason why we have taken it is because we need a very small unit, and for that we have taken carbon 12 as the reference, which basically means that the mass of carbon 12 nucleus is 12 AMU, and all the masses which are very small sizes, I mean for particles of like protons and neutrons, even nucleus, all the masses will be represented in terms of AMUs. Now when we look at the masses of proton and neutron, so they are roughly like this. Mass of proton is somewhere around 1.0073 AMU, and the mass of neutron is somewhere around 1.0087 AMU. So you don't have to remember these values. If at all there are any numerical questions given to you, they will be representing this in the question itself. So no need to worry about that. I am just showing you their values. Mass of electron is somewhere around 0.00055 AMU, so which is a very small value. You know that this value is somewhere around 1840 times smaller than the mass of proton. So a very small value. And one important thing which you will have to note here is that mass of neutron is slightly greater than the mass of proton. So this will be of some help for us later on in this particular topic. Okay, so that is the basic idea. Now let us see how we represent a nucleus. So let us write it as representation of nucleus. So if I consider an element which is named as X, so some element X, so if I have to represent the nucleus of that particular element, so this is the general method which we will be using, XZA. So when I write something like this, you should understand that I am talking about the nucleus of X. Now in this particular representation, so we have Z and A. So X represents the name of that particular element or the symbol of that particular element. So Z here can be understood as atomic number. It is also called as charge number sometimes, which means the same, the charge that is present in the nucleus, and this can also be understood as number of protons that are present inside the nucleus. Now similarly, when I write A, A is called as mass number, and it basically gives us an idea about the total number of protons and neutrons that are present in the nucleus. So, this is nothing but number of protons plus number of neutrons. So, in simple terms we can say that the total number of nucleons that are present in the nucleus is what we represent as A. So, A is also called mass number. So, this is the general representation. So, just like we have represented nucleus with this particular symbol or that particular expression. So, there is also another way of a similar way of representing all the fundamental particles like proton. So, proton is generally represented like this with a P, and the charge number of proton is basically taken as +1, and the mass is taken as 1 as well. The mass number is also considered as 1, and neutron being a neutral particle, we represent it as 0, the charge being 0 and the mass being 1. And similarly, if we represent electron, so electron is represented like this, the charge of that, the charge number for that is -1 and the mass number is considered as 0. It is very small mass, so it can be considered as 0. So, these are the general ways in which we represent a nucleus and all the fundamental particles. So, after this let us analyze the nucleus. So, to understand the properties of these nucleus, we basically segregate them into different groups. We call them as nuclear groups. So, let us now understand these groups one by one. So, the first one is called isotopes. So, you would have heard of this. So, isotopes basically mean group of different nuclei which have the same Z value, but different A value. I will write it down here. So, all the elements in this particular group have same Z and different A mass number. So, they have the same charge number, but they have the different mass number. So, I will give you an example for that. We can say C12, C13 and C14 are isotopes. So, they all have the same Z value, but they have a different A value, mass number is different for all the three. Now, what happens with these isotopes is that, so most of the isotopes generally have the same chemical properties, because chemical properties of an atom is basically decided by the electrons, not by how many neutrons are present inside that particular nucleus. So, whatever these three isotopes here, they differ in the number of neutrons. So, when they have the same Z value, it means that they have the same number of protons. The reason why they have different A value is because you know that A value is nothing but protons plus neutrons. So, because of same Z, they have the same number of protons, but different number of neutrons. So, having different number of neutrons is not going to affect the chemical properties of that particular group. So, that is the basic idea. And the next group we can say are isobars. So, isobars basically mean nuclei having same A value, but different Z value. So, they have the same mass number, but different atomic number. So, you can say carbon 612 or 614 and N714. So, these are what we call as isobars. And the third group we can call them as isotones. So, isotones are the collection of those nuclei which have same A minus Z value. So, you know that A minus Z basically represents, A represents protons plus neutrons, Z represents protons. So, this value A minus Z, it basically means the number of neutrons. So, all those group of nuclei which have the same number of neutrons in them, they are called as isotones. And similarly, we can have isodiaphers, and isodiaphers are basically those which have the same value of A minus 2Z. Now, once again, you should understand this A minus 2Z as A minus Z minus Z. Now, just earlier we have seen that A minus Z means the number of neutrons and Z is the number of protons. So, this basically means A minus 2Z basically means the difference in the number of neutrons and protons. So, this is number of neutrons minus number of protons. So, if this value is same, then that group of nuclei are what we call as isodiaphers. So, students, let us now understand the size of the nucleus. So, we all know that the size of the nucleus is very small when compared to the size of an atom. It occupies a very small volume inside an atom. So, when we look at the radius that an atom has, so at atomic radius, let us call it as. So, the size of an atom is roughly in the order of somewhere around 10 power minus 10 meters. So, which means in angstroms. So, whereas when it comes to nucleus, so nuclear radius is generally very small. So, nuclear radius is somewhere around 10 power minus 15 meters. So, 10 power minus 15 meter is also called as femtometer. It is represented with Fm. Okay. So, it was observed that through many experiments, the nuclear density, so of all the nucleus, all the nuclei have the same nuclear density. So, this was an observation which was made through many experiments. Now, based on this particular idea, considering that all of them have the same density, you know that density can be written as mass by volume. Now, when I consider this particular expression, when rho is constant, we can say that the volume of the nucleus is directly proportional to the mass of the nucleus. And if I consider that the volume, the nucleus is in the form of a sphere, I can write the volume of this as 4 by 3 pi r cube is proportional to mass. How do we write the mass of the nucleus? So, if I make some approximations, we know that mass is basically coming because of the protons and neutrons which are present in that particular nucleus, and let us say whether it is mass of proton or mass of neutron, they are approximately equal to 1 AMU. So, under that assumption, we can say that mass of a nucleus can be considered to be approximately same as its mass number. So, mass number means number of protons plus neutrons. So, when I am doing this approximation, I am considering that the mass of proton and mass of neutron are approximately 1 AMU. Okay. Now, looking at this particular scenario, I can say that R cube is proportional to A, and when I get a proportionality constant there, the value of that would be 1.2 into 10 power minus 15 meters. That would be the constant which we get. All these are experimentally derived results into A power 1 by 3. So, this term here we can represent it with some R naught. So, we can write R is equal to R naught into A power 1 by 3. So, as I told you earlier, 10 power minus 15 meters, it can be called as 1 femtometer or a Fermi. It is also called as 1 Fermi. So, 1 Fermi is equal to 1 femtometer. It is equal to 10 power minus 15 meters. So, finally, the value of R naught is 1.2 Fermi. Okay, so that is the basic idea. So the proportionality here is very important. We can say that the radius of that nucleus, considering the nucleus is almost a sphere which it is close to, So we can say that the radius of the nucleus is proportional to a power 1 by 3, where a is the mass number of that particular nucleus. So when we look at a nucleus, which generally is like this, it has protons and neutrons throughout its volume. So you might get a doubt that these protons, which I have represented with P's over here, so these protons, they are positive charges, which means they repel each other, they try to move away from each other. In spite of them trying to go away from each other, they are still together in a very small volume, they are confined in a very small size. So unless and until there is someone holding them together from going away, they will move away from each other. So what is that agent which keeps all of those protons together? So who is basically holding that nucleus together in spite of them trying to go away? And the answer for that is nuclear force. So nuclear force is a new kind of force which we haven't discussed till now. Earlier in our first year, laws of motion, we have learned that there are 4 fundamental forces: gravitation, electromagnetism, weak nuclear forces and strong nuclear forces. So for now, let's call them as nuclear force. So these forces are completely different from what we have discussed earlier. So we'll discuss about few properties, and as you can see, this is the one which is responsible for holding all these nucleons together. If this force was not there, then they repel away from each other. Okay, so let us talk about few properties of this nuclear force. So the first thing that we can tell about this particular force is that it is a short range force. So it is a short range force. It acts between nucleons which are at a very small separation between each other, and we can say that it is independent of charge. So this force does not depend on whether the particles have charge or not, which means they act the same way between neutron-neutron, between proton-proton, or in between neutron and proton. So all these interactions will be the same, and this force is basically attractive in nature. So it is not always attractive, but when we consider the separation between protons and neutrons at the nuclear size inside a nucleus, so inside nucleus the separation is just sufficient for them to be attractive in nature. And similarly, we can say that these forces are non-conservative forces. And these are spin dependent forces. So spin dependent means basically all these nucleons also have some spin associated with them. They will be rotating about their own axis. So what spin dependent means is that if I consider 2 nucleons, so if these 2 nucleons are spinning in the same sense, the force between them will be different from the case when the 2 have opposite spins. So if this is spinning in this sense and this is spinning in the opposite sense, so the force between these 2 nucleons and these 2 nucleons are different. So the force between those nucleons will depend on the sense of rotation, the spin basically. So that nuclear force is the one which acts like a glue and holds all those nucleons together. So you can basically write that the stability of a nucleus is established through the attractive forces or attractive nuclear forces which balance out the repulsive electromagnetic forces. So that is how we can understand. So those nuclear forces are the ones which are responsible for holding that nucleus as one single entity. So now let us try to understand the correlation between the size of the nucleus and the number of neutrons that are present in that particular nucleus. So this is something which you would have observed. So when we have let us say carbon is 612. It means that it has 6 protons and the number of neutrons is also 6. 12 minus 6 is 6. And similarly, if I consider oxygen is 8, 16. So 8 protons and 8 neutrons. And as I go higher towards larger mass numbers, so let us say if we consider chlorine is 1735. And if I consider let us say zinc is 30 and 65. So what you observe here is that if I look at chlorine has 17 protons and the number of neutrons is the difference, which is 35 minus 17, which is 18. So it has 1 neutron more than the number of protons. And if you look at zinc is 30, it has 30 protons and it has 35 neutrons. You can go even higher. You can talk about uranium. So uranium has 92 and 235. So 92 protons and roughly 143 neutrons. So as you see, as we go higher and higher towards larger atomic number or larger mass number, the number of neutrons are increasing continuously to attain stability. So whatever I have written here, they are all stable nuclei. So for a nucleus to attain stability, you can observe that as we move towards higher elements, the number of neutrons required are also higher. So this is a very important thing, and there is one reason for that. So let us look at a nucleus. If I look at a nucleus, it generally let us say has protons, let us say here. So whatever I am writing here now are protons at different positions. So let us say it has these many protons, and similarly it has neutrons. So I am representing it with N. Okay. So protons and neutrons are present in that nucleus. So now if I consider this particular proton, the one which is over here. So now let us see what type of forces that neutron experiences. So this proton experiences a repulsive force from each and every one of these protons, and we can say that the resultant of all that repulsive force is in this direction. So let us consider that this is the repulsive force. And similarly, we can say that this proton also experiences some attractive force because of the neutrons and protons which are around it. Nuclear force is basically attractive in nature, but the problem with nuclear force is that we have discussed that nuclear force is a short range force. So short range force basically means this proton can experience an attractive nuclear force only due to the nucleons which are surrounding to it. So the ones which are far away cannot exert that attractive force. So what happens here is that as the nucleus becomes bigger and bigger, so this repulsive force is not going to decrease, or this repulsive force will be applied by all these nucleons also, whereas the attractive force will not increase. The attractive force comes only from, let us say, this region because of its short range nature. So it can only experience attractive force from those nucleons which are very close to it. So the ones which are farther away, they can't exert any attractive force on this particular proton. So, as a result, now think what happens as the size of the nucleus increases. As the size of the nucleus increases, this proton experiences larger and larger repulsive force because more number of protons will be present, but the number of attractive forces which it gets is not increasing because attractive forces only come from this region. So, only this region is responsible for attractive forces, whereas the whole region is responsible for repulsive force. So, that is the basic idea. So, the only way it can be balanced, or the only way this nucleus can attain stability is if there are more number of neutrons. So, by putting more number of neutrons into it, we are basically reducing the extent of repulsive forces and increasing the extent of attractive forces. So, that is the basic reason why we need more number of neutrons as the size keeps increasing. So, in general we can say the number of neutrons is greater than or equal to the number of protons in any stable nuclei. So, this is a general trend that will be observed and this difference keeps increasing also. As we go higher and higher, the number of neutrons becomes greater and greater. Students, let us now understand the formation of a nucleus. So, how a nucleus is formed and what happens when a nucleus is formed. So, I will be considering the example of carbon for this explanation. So, carbon C612. So, in this particular case, you know that there are 6 protons and 6 neutrons which combine to form a carbon nucleus. So, when I write it like that, 6 protons plus 6 neutrons gives carbon 612. Now, what you would also observe during this process is that this is accompanied by a release of some energy. So, it means that whenever a nucleus is formed, not just carbon, whenever any nucleus is formed from its constituent particles, definitely there will be some energy released during that process. Now, this energy which is released has a large significance in determining what kind of stability this formed nucleus has. We will learn about that in a while. So, we will talk about that energy. First, let us talk about what happens to the mass during this process. When this nuclear reaction takes place, nuclear reaction basically means a reaction involving the nucleons. Whenever nucleons come together or change, move away from each other, or when they combine with each other. So, that kind of process is what we call as a nuclear reaction. Okay. So, in this particular nuclear reaction, let us see what happens to the masses. So, on this side we have 6 times mass of proton plus 6 times mass of neutron, and on the other side of the reaction we have mass of carbon 612. So, one would naturally expect that because this is a usual reaction, the mass on this side and the mass on that side should be equal to each other, but that is not what happens in this scenario. What we would observe is that the mass of reactants. So, this is the reactant side and this is the product side and this is the product. So, we would observe that the mass of the reactants is greater when compared to the mass of the product. So, what this means is that the mass of the nucleus formed is always less than the mass of, or the sum of masses of constituent particles. So, that is what it means. So, the nucleus which is formed because of the interaction of these nucleons always has lesser mass. So, I will also show you the reason why I have taken carbon is because I can show you that with an example. So, if you just take this particular scenario and calculate the mass on either side, on this side we have 6 times 1.0073 plus 6 times mass of neutron is 1.0087, and on this side we have 12 AMU. So, this is also in AMU and that is also in AMU. Now, you can easily expect that this value is definitely greater than 12. So, you can actually see, even though there is no loss of particles, happening here. We have 6 protons and 6 neutrons on this side. Even a carbon nucleus also has 6 protons and 6 neutrons inside it. So, there is nothing leaving the system. There is no particle going away from the system, but still there is a loss in mass. Now, one thing we have to understand here is that we have been used till now throughout the discussion of physics or any other, even in chemistry, you have been accustomed, you have been used to understanding mass with matter. You have been associating mass with matter. So, which is what we will be doing differently here. Now, we will be understanding that this difference in mass is arising because definitely something has left the system. It is not matter, it is not particles, but you can observe that in the equation itself which I have written, what has left the system? Energy is what left the system, and because energy has left the system, that loss in energy is what is getting reflected in the form of decrease in mass. So, this is something which is very important for you to understand. So, mass and energy are equivalent, they can be interconvertible. So, it is like saying this system of 6 protons and 6 neutrons, they are not interacting with each other here, they are just individual isolated particles. So, these 6 protons and 6 neutrons, they are far away from each other. So, that system, and this is a system where all of them are brought together. So, when all those particles which are far away are brought together, this system has lesser energy, and that difference in energy is released here during this process. And because energy is leaving the system, we are looking at it as loss in mass. So, this is something which is new to you. So, we understand this in terms of something called mass energy equivalence. So, mass energy equivalence basically suggests that whenever there is some change in energy that occurs in a system, so that can be associated with a change in mass also. So, this was the relation which was given by Einstein. You must have seen this equation, a very famous equation, E is equal to delta m into c square. So, what that suggests is that whenever a process occurs, and because of which if there is some loss in energy in a particular system, it means that that system also decreases in mass, and the amount of mass that decreases in the system because of energy leaving the system can be calculated by using this particular expression. I'll just elaborate it with a simple example. So, if for example, let us say we have a positive charge and a negative charge, they are separated by some distance r or r1, let us say, and let us say you have calculated the mass of this particular system and the value has been some, it came around some m1. Now, what you have done is, because they are positive and negative charges, they try to move towards each other. So, you, an external agent, you have held them and you have separated them to a larger distance. You know that to separate two charges attracting each other, you have to do some work, you have to spend some energy, which means to bring this from this state to this state, where the separation is even larger. So, to bring it to this state, you have to do some work, you are separating them, you are spending energy in that process. Now, what this means is that for this system, you have supplied energy and you have converted that into this system. So, if I consider the energy of this system is U1 and energy of this system is U2, what happens here is that because this one has more energy, you have supplied some energy from this state. That is why this state is reached. So, in this case U2 is greater than U1. So, this system has more energy. Now, what happens is that when you measure this system very precisely, what happens is you would observe that the mass of this system is greater than the mass of this system. So, in this case when you calculate, you get M2 to be greater than M1, and this is true actually. So, if you actually have some instrument which is very precise to measure that small changes also, you would definitely observe that, because whenever you are measuring mass, what you are doing is you are basically measuring its interaction energies, and in this particular case you have added some energy into the system, and that is why it appears as more mass. So, this is something which is very new to you, I repeat once again. So, energy and mass are equivalent. So, what happens is when you have a system which has a particular mass, if you induce some energy, if you give it some energy, it is basically equivalent to increasing the mass, and if you remove some energy from the system, it is equivalent to decreasing the mass. So, transfer of energy also relates to the change in mass, and that can be understood by using this particular expression. So, we will see how to understand this mathematically in a while. So, to understand this equation mathematically, so we have been measuring all the values of mass in AMUs, even the change in mass is measured in AMUs. So, whenever we have a mass of let us say 1 AMU, so let us understand, if 1 AMU mass of change has to occur, how much does that mean in energy, in terms of joules or in terms of electron volts. So, when I use this 1 AMU, when I substitute this into this particular expression, I get E is equal to 1 AMU, or let us say I will do it in SI units. So, which is 1.66 into 10 power minus 27 into C square is 3 into 10 power 8 whole square. So, when I calculate this expression which is in joules, and if I convert that into electron volts, I would get this particular expression 931.5 million electron volts. Million basically represents 10 power 6. So, 931.5 MeV. So, what this expression means is that when I change the system's mass by 1 AMU, not by change I mean convert that 1 AMU mass into energy, it comes around as this much value of energy, which also means if you have a system and if you give that system this much energy and you measure its mass will be greater than the earlier case by 1 AMU. So, this is the conversion factor which we will be using. So, we can write it like this: 1 AMU is equal to 931.5 million electron volts by C square, which means 1 AMU into C square is 931.5 million electron volts. So, that is how you should understand. So, when you change the system's energy by this much value, its mass changes by this much value. So, that is the idea. So, whenever a nuclear reaction occurs, we know that there is a conversion happening between mass and energy. Mass might get converted into energy or energy might get converted into mass. So, to understand this process, we would need to understand this term called mass defect, and it is represented with delta M. So, for any nuclear reaction, we define mass defect as delta M is equal to mass of reactants minus mass of products. So, this is the expression which we write for mass defect, and along with this definition, let us also see one more definition which we call as Q value. And Q value is just defined as the equivalent energy of this mass defect. You know that mass defect means the change in mass that is occurring during that nuclear reaction, and when I convert that change in mass into its equivalent energy, So, that equivalent energy is called Q value. Q value is the equivalent energy of mass defect, and we know how to convert mass defect into energy. We have just seen the conversion, the relation. So, I can write Q value as Q is equal to delta M into C square. Now, these two terms which I have written here are very important terms. Most of the numerical questions related to nuclear physics would be asked on this simple relation. So, calculating the mass defect is nothing but adding all the reactants masses and then subtracting product's mass from it. And when you multiply that mass defect with C square, you get the equivalent value of its energy. Now, in the earlier question which we have discussed, which is the formation of carbon nucleus, we have seen that the mass defect of that nuclear reaction was 6 into 1.0073 plus 6 into 1.0087 minus 12. 12 is the mass of product, which is carbon nucleus. Now, this is the mass defect of carbon nucleus, and this value here is in AMU because all the masses are in AMU. Now, if I have to find out how much energy is released or what is the Q value of that reaction, the formation of carbon nucleus. So, we can directly say that Q value of that reaction is whatever this value comes around as, whatever it is, so that value into C square. Or if you, because this value here is in AMU, we can directly write that as if 1 AMU converts into 931.5 million electron volts, what does delta M convert to? It is nothing but delta M into 931.5. 1 converts to 931.5. How much does delta M convert to? So, we can say the relation like this. 1 means 1 corresponds to 931.5 and delta M corresponds to what? So, you can use the proportionality, this by this is equal to this by this. So, you will get this unknown value as delta M into 931.5 million electron volts. So, whenever you need to find the Q value of the reaction, all you will have to do is calculate the mass defect, and if it is in AMU, multiply that with 931.5 million electron volts. If it is in kg, substitute that into this equation and multiply that with 3 into 10 power 8 whole square. So, that is the method for calculating Q value. Now, what is the meaning of Q value? Let us see what is the meaning of Q value. So, Q value can be positive or negative. So, Q value is positive when mass defect is positive, which means we can write here that this case happens when mass of reactants is greater than mass of products, and Q value is negative when mass of products is greater than mass of reactants. So, Q value gives us a very important information. In this case, if reactant's mass is greater, so you think of your own, the initial mass is greater and the final mass is lesser. What would happen in that reaction? Is energy released in that reaction or is energy supplied in that reaction? If reactants have more mass, which means as the reaction happens, mass is decreasing. So, you all know when mass is decreasing, it is getting converted into energy. So, that energy is released. So, which means in this process, energy is released, and whenever Q value is negative, we can understand that energy should be supplied. So, that is the significance of Q value. So, whenever Q value is positive, it means that it is an exothermic reaction. So, this corresponds to an exothermic reaction, and this corresponds to endothermic reaction. So you can easily tell this by just looking at their masses also, masses of reactants and masses of products. So that is the basic idea. Now this Q value can be defined for any reaction, not just the formation of nucleus, it can be defined for any reaction, even a reaction in which two nucleus combine with each other, or a reaction in which one nucleus breaks down into two different nucleus. I will just write down few cases here. If let us say there is a reaction in which a nucleus X and nucleus Y combines to form a nucleus Z. So we call such a reaction as fusion reaction, nuclear fusion. And there could be a reaction in which a nucleus A, let us not use A, that is for mass number. So let us use something else. P is something which is getting broken down into Q plus R. So here one nucleus is breaking down into two different nuclei. So such a reaction is called as fission reaction. Now like I told you, Q value can be defined for any kind of nuclear reaction. It could be fusion, it could be fission, or it could be formation of a nucleus. When we have a formation of nucleus, we write Z protons plus A minus Z neutrons gives rise to some nucleus X Z A. So this is how we represent a reaction where a nucleus is being formed. Z protons and A minus Z neutrons are combining to form X A Z. So this is formation of nucleus. Okay, so these are the different types of nuclear reactions, and Q value can be calculated for any reaction. So Q value positive means that that reaction will occur with the release of energy. Q value is negative means that that reaction will not occur on its own. We have to supply energy to make that reaction happen. So now let's look at this thing which we have been discussing till now. So whenever we calculate the Q value of a reaction where a nucleus is being formed, so Q value of this reaction is also called binding energy. Once again, Q value can be defined for any sort of nuclear reaction. It is just change in mass, which is mass defect, converting into energy. Now, if that Q value is defined for a reaction where a nucleus is being formed, we call that value of Q as binding energy. Now, let us understand what binding energy means. It is a very important concept which determines the stability of a nucleus. So, let us see that. So, binding energy, like we discussed just now, it is nothing but the energy released during the formation of a nucleus, and it is nothing but the Q value of a reaction, which is what we use to find out the released energy. So, Q is equal to delta M into C square. So, now if I consider a general reaction of formation of nucleus, which is Z protons plus A minus Z, which is the neutron number of neutrons gives X ZA. So, to write the expression for binding energy of this reaction, I can directly write it as mass of reactants minus mass of products, which is Z times the mass of proton plus A minus Z times the mass of neutron minus the mass of this nucleus X Z A. So, what I have written here is not something new, just it might look like having many variables, but just understand that this is the same expression which we have been writing till now, adding all the reactants mass and subtracting products mass from there. Now, this into 931.5 million electron volts, considering that these are all in AMUs. So, this into 931.5 million electron volts is what we call as binding energy of nucleus. So, what binding energy means is, when that nucleus is formed, this much energy is released. Now, there is also one more very important way in which binding energy can be understood. It can also be defined as the energy that should be supplied, to break down a nucleus into its constituent particles. So, if you observe closely the expression which I have written here, the energy that should be supplied to break down a nucleus into its constituent particles. I have just defined the opposite of what we discussed earlier. So, it means we can understand binding energy either as the energy released when a nucleus is formed, and when that nucleus is with you now, if you give the energy which was released back to the nucleus, you can break it down into the constituent particles. So, what that means is, I will write it down over here. I am just going to now write the reverse of this reaction. So, XZA can be broken down into Z protons and A minus Z neutrons. It can be done, but for you to be able to make this reaction happen, if you want to break down a nucleus into its constituent particles, you have to supply energy, because if for this reaction delta M is positive, then for this reaction delta M is negative, which means this would be an endothermic reaction, and which means you have to supply energy. So, if you give binding energy to this nucleus, so if binding energy is supplied to this nucleus, you can break it down into constituent particles, or in the same manner, if you give or if you make these constituent particles combine with each other, it forms the nucleus with the release of energy. So, these are the two ways in which we can understand binding energy. So, energy released when nucleus is formed, or the energy that should be supplied to the nucleus to break it down into constituent particles. And either ways, the method for calculation of binding energy is the same. It is nothing but the Q value of the reaction, and Q value means delta M into C square. Binding energy also has one more very important significance. So, it basically gives us an idea of how stable a nucleus is. So, when I consider a nucleus, let us say some XZA, and if I know the binding energy of this nucleus, so binding energy means the energy required to break it down. So, let us understand it in that way. So, if I give binding energy, amount of energy to X, I can break it down. So, what does it mean when binding energy is greater? If a nucleus has greater binding energy, it means that to break it down, I have to give more energy, which means it is difficult for me to break down a nucleus. So, higher binding energy implies higher stability. So, it is difficult for us to break down that into constituent particles, but to understand stability, there is in fact a even more appropriate term which can be used. It is not binding energy. Binding energy will give us an idea about stability, but something which gives us a very good idea about stability is something which we call as binding energy per nucleon. So, binding energy per nucleon is what gives us an idea of stability, a better idea of stability. Now, binding energy per nucleon basically means binding energy divided by the number of nucleons in that particular nucleus, which is what we know as A. So, Be by A. So, Be by A is what we call as binding energy per nucleon, and this gives us an idea of stability. Why? Because if I have to understand how stable a nucleus is, I have to look at not how difficult it is for me to break it down completely, but how difficult it is for me to remove one nucleon, and this gives us an idea about that. So, this tells us the energy required to remove one nucleon from a nucleus, because this is the total binding energy by the total number of nucleons. It basically tells us an idea of binding energy associated with one nucleon. So, if you have to remove one nucleon, roughly, it is not an exact value, it is roughly equal to this much amount of energy. So, if you give this much amount of energy, you might be able to remove one nucleon. So, then that nucleus becomes a completely different nucleus. So, that is the reason why we understand the stability of a nucleus in terms of binding energy of nucleon. Now, let us try to understand the stability of different nuclei by looking at their binding energy per nucleon values. So, let us see the graph between binding energy per nucleon and the number of nucleons, which is the mass number. So, the graph looks something like this. So, this is how it looks, and there are two things which you will have to observe carefully from this graph. One is that this is the nucleus with the least binding energy per nucleon. So, that is deuterium. So, deuterium is the nucleus with the least binding energy per nucleon. So, it is the most unstable nucleus, and if you see here, this is helium, which is roughly having binding energy per nucleon of 7. Whatever I have written here is in million electron volts. So, the binding energy per nucleon for helium is around 7, and if you see here, there are some peaks forming there. So, those peaks are the ones which correspond to nucleus having a higher stability when compared to the adjacent nuclei, and we do not have to worry about the reasons for that as of now. We can learn them later. And if you look here, somewhere over here, this is where the peak is being formed, and if I look at which value of A has this value of peak, this here would be 56, which is Fe. So, the mass number of Fe, iron, is 56. So, the iron nucleus is the most stable nucleus of all the nuclei that are possible, and the value of this binding energy per nucleon is approximately 8.8 million electron volts. And even all the higher nuclei, you can see that after this, as the mass number increases, the binding energy per nucleon decreases once again. So, the higher elements are also unstable, the higher nuclei with the higher mass number, they are also unstable. So, this is the one with the most stability. So, this is the understanding which you will have to get from the graph. So, we will now discuss few questions based on the concepts which we have discussed on mass defect, Q value and binding energy. So, remember that there are only two equations which will be requiring. One is Q is equal to delta M into C square, and the conversion factor is something which you will have to keep in mind, and the other one is mass defect is equal to mass of reactants minus mass of products. So, if you are aware of these two concepts, then each and every numerical related to nuclear physics can be completed. So, let us see. So, here it is given that the formation of oxygen nucleus is happening, and it is happening through this process. So, there are 4 helium nuclei which are getting converted into one oxygen nucleus. Now, they are saying in this process, if the mass of oxygen nucleus is 15.9994 AMU, find the mass of alpha particle meaning helium nucleus, if the energy released in the process is 10.24 million electron volts. So, they have given that this is the Q value and we also know that the Q value is positive because they have said that the energy is released. So, you will have to look for information like this, each and every bit of information, and they have given that the Q value is 10.24 million electron volts. Now, I will use a very the two basic formula which we have discussed till now. So, the basic expression for Q value of a reaction is delta M into, because everything is in AMU, I can directly write it as delta M into 931.5 MeV, and from the question itself they have given that the Q value is 10.24 MeV. Now, I will just substitute the value of delta M. So, delta M means mass of reactants minus mass of products. So, this is the reactant side. So, whenever a nuclear reaction is given to you, first make sure that the nuclear reaction is possible or not. So, in this case it is possible. So, the reason is here we have 4 as the mass number and here we have 16 as the mass number. So, always remember that in any nuclear reaction, on either side, on the reactant side and the product side, the mass numbers and the charge numbers or the atomic numbers should definitely match. So, which means here you can see 4 is the mass number, there are 4 such nuclei. So, 4 into 4, 16. So, that way you have to check. They might sometimes ask you questions based on balancing that nuclear reaction also. Okay. Coming back to this, so delta M is nothing but mass of reactants minus mass of products. So, when I substitute that, I get 4 times mass of alpha particle minus mass of oxygen nucleus, or let me write it like this, mass of oxygen and mass of alpha particle. So, this into 931.5 is 10.24, which means this is equal to 10.24 divided by 931.5. So, that is the value which I get, and the value of this here will be in AMU. Now, they are asking us to find the mass of alpha particle. So, I can write the mass of alpha particle as, when I send this to the other side, this value is already given to us. So, 15.9994 plus this value, which is 10.24 by 931.5 divided by, we have a 4 over here, by 4. So, that would be the mass of alpha particle. So, that is how we calculate. I just used a very simple relation. They have already given the value of Q, and I have written Q as mass defect into 931.5 million electron volts. You all know that when I write it this way, the value of delta M which I get, so the value of delta M which I get will be in AMU. So, this is in AMU, and I just simplified that equation. Okay. Now, let us see another question. So, here they have given us a nuclear reaction which is represented as X plus Y gives Z. So, I told you earlier, this is called as a fusion reaction. We will learn about that later. So, in this reaction, so they have basically given us the binding energies of all the 3 different nuclei. So, they have not given us the mass. If mass was given to us, we could have directly used delta M into C square to find the Q value. But in this case, they have not given us the masses here. Instead, what they have done is they have given us their binding energies. Now, this is something which is very, very important. I want you to carefully listen because there are many questions which were asked on this concept previously in different exams. So, what I will do here is, because mass is not known to us, I will have to somehow use these binding energies to understand the Q value of the reaction. So, this is how it will be done. What I will do is, I will just make a table like this, and on one side I will be writing supplied energy, and on the other side I will write received energy. Now, what I am going to do here is this. This reaction X plus Y gives rise to Z. So, what I am going to do now is that I am going to break down this into constituent particles. I will break X. and I'll also break Y. And then by using all the nucleons which I get by breaking X and Y, I'll combine them together and I'll produce Z. So think of it this way. The reason why we are doing this is because we don't know the masses. If masses were known, we can directly write delta M into C square. But here, because masses are not known, I'll use the definition of binding energy to solve this question. You all know that binding energy can be understood as energy supplied to break a nucleus, or energy formed when a nucleus is created, or energy released when a nucleus is created. So, I am exactly going to use that definition here. So, X plus Y gives Z. I am thinking of it as breaking X into particles, protons plus neutrons, breaking Y into particles, and then combining all those particles to produce Z. So, that is the idea. Now, you all know that to break a nucleus, we supply energy. So, in these two cases, we are supplying the energy, and here we get the energy. Whenever a nucleus is formed, energy is released. So, I am just going to write those values in this table. So, we know to break X, we need this much amount of energy, because binding energy means that. Binding energy means energy required to break X. So, 150 million electron volts of energy is required to break X. So, I will write that in the supplied column. Now, similarly, I am also breaking Y. To break Y, we need to supply the binding energy of Y, which is 300 million electron volts. Now, once I do this, I am now having, because I have broken down these nuclei into particles, I have those nucleons with me which are very far away. Now, I am bringing them all together to create Z, which means I am producing that nucleus Z. And whenever that nucleus Z is formed, we know that an energy which is equivalent to its binding energy is released. So, now I am going to write that in the received column. I have received that energy. So, which is 500 million electron volts. So, now when you just find the total values, here we have 450 million electron volts, and on this side we have 500 million electron volts. So, now you can decide for yourself. So, the received is higher and the supplied is lower, which means as a whole I can say that net energy received or released during that process is equal to 50 million electron volts. So, from that I can say that the Q value of any reaction basically means the energy released or supplied in that particular reaction. So, in this reaction the energy released is 50 million electron volts. So, we can say that it is an exothermic reaction. So, please once again I am repeating, whenever you need to calculate the Q value, you have two methods. One is directly writing delta M into C square, and the second one is by using binding energies. I'll just summarize this as one formula in a while. So, students, to summarize what we have discussed till now, so Q value of any reaction can be written as delta M into C square. So, where delta M means mass of reactants minus mass of products into, I can directly write it as 931.5 million electron volts, because usually we take this value in AMU. Okay. Now, the same expression, the same Q value can also be written as, just like we wrote mass of reactants minus mass of products into C square, it can be written as binding energy of products minus binding energy of reactants. So, both the expressions are one and the same. So, whenever masses of the reactants and products are known, you use this expression. Whenever binding energies of the products and reactants are known, you use this expression. Both mean one and the same, and this expression can be derived from this expression also. So, both are one and the same. So, remember this, when you have binding energies you use products minus reactants, when you have masses you use reactants minus products. So, you remember any one expression and remember that the other one is the opposite way around. So, that would be sufficient. So, here let us see one more question. They have given us a reaction x plus y gives z. So, this is once again a kind of fusion reaction. So, they have also given us the binding energy per nucleon this time. Earlier we have talked about binding energies, this time binding energy per nucleon. So, of x, y and z, all the three are given to us. And if you look at this reaction, x 10 plus y 20 gives z 30. So, sometimes they might give you the same question like this, they might skip this 30 and you will have to understand that it is 30 there. So, if they just give the equation like this, you will have to understand by balancing it on both sides that 30 is the mass number on the product side. Okay. Now, we need to find the Q value. We know the method for finding the Q value. We have just discussed that whenever we have binding energies, we write a different expression. Whenever we have masses, we write a different expression. And whenever we have binding energies, we write it as binding energy of products minus binding energy of reactants. So, let us calculate that binding energy of products. We have only one term in the product, which is this. So, per nucleon the binding energy is 7.5 MeV. So, which means for 30 nucleons how much would it be? It would be 30 into 7.5. So, that is it, that would be the binding energy of products minus binding energy of reactants. So, reactants we have two. So, first write for x. So, binding energy per nucleon of x is 7.2 and there are 10 such nucleons. So, I can write it as 10 into 7.2, that will be the overall binding energy, plus what is the binding energy for the other term. So, we have 20 nucleons in y and each nucleon has a binding energy of 5.5 MeV. So, 20 into 5.5. So, when I calculate this, you can check whether it is positive or negative. You have 72 here, plus here you have 110, and this value here comes around 75 into 3. So, 75 into 3 is 225. So, 225 minus, that is 182. So, this is 43. So, the value of this is 43 MeV and you got a positive value, which means that this is an exothermic reaction. So, energy is released during this process. So, once again I am reminding you, please understand why we are writing this expression in this manner. Go back to the earlier example and look at the table which I have drawn, the supplied and the received columns, and understand why we are doing it that way and how we have written Q in this form. Understanding this is very, very important. So, let us discuss a question now. So, this one is a previous JEE question. So, let us see. So, basically here they have given 4 different nuclei x, y, z and w, and on this graph you can see their corresponding binding energy per nucleon. So, if you take Z which has a mass number of 30 has 5 million electron volts of binding energy per nucleon, and similarly you can understand the others. Now, here they have given us 4 reactions, 4 nuclear reactions. Definitely all the 4 would be feasible reactions. By feasible I mean that on either side the mass numbers should be matching. So, let us just check for one. If I consider this, W gives X plus Z. So just check whether the mass numbers are matching or not. So W has a mass number of 120, X has a mass number of 90, and Z has a mass number of 30. So you can see that 120 is equal to 90 plus 30. So it is matching basically. So all the reactions given to you are reactions which are feasible. So now what you will have to do is check how many of these reactions are going to release the energy, which means they are asking us to find out which of those 4 reactions have a positive Q value. And you all know once again that we measure Q value by writing this expression, binding energy of products minus binding energy of reactants. So what I will do is I will take one case and I will just check the Q value of that. So let us just consider this. So first I will have to consider products. I have 2 products here, 2 terms in the product. So I will have to write the binding energies for both. Now here we are not given binding energies, we are given binding energy per nucleon. So I will have to convert that into binding energy. So what is the binding energy of X, which has 90 as mass number? I can write it as 90 into its corresponding binding energy per nucleon, which is 8, plus there is also Z, and Z has 30 mass number and 5 binding energy per nucleon. So plus 30 into 5. So this is the binding energy of products minus binding energy of reactants. There is only one term in the reactant, which is W, and for W you can write 7.5 into 120 as binding energy. So this would be 120 into 7.5. So all you will have to do now is check whether this expression here is positive or negative, just evaluate that. So this value here comes around as 720 plus 150 minus 120 into 7.5, which is 900. So if you evaluate this, this would be 870 minus 900, and you are getting a negative value over here. So minus 30 million electron volts. So which means this reaction is an endothermic reaction. So for this reaction to happen, you have to supply energy, otherwise it won't happen. So in that way, I want you to check for all the 4 cases, and I have already decided that this is an endothermic reaction. So I want you to check for the other 3 and find which ones are exothermic, which ones will release energy. So students, that is about the initial part of nuclear physics, so which involves mass defect, binding energies and Q values. So the concepts are very simple here. So there will be only 2 expressions which you will have to understand clearly. So understanding the Q value, mass defect and binding energies. So make sure that the concept around this is very clear for you, and in the next class we will discuss about radioactivity.